In previous tutorials, we saw how to make a game and how to add some features like scrolling and backgrounds. One thing that we noticed in our previous sample game is that the movement of the object was fairly simple. For example, all of the enemies moved in simple straight lines, and they all had similar movements. Sometimes it makes sense to have enemies that are, or objects in general, that move in a more complicated way. For example, a boss enemy. Today we want to show you two different methods of doing this to create more complicated movements for characters, for objects. We want to do this through creating a boss enemy. First, we add a sprite, which is going to be the shape of our boss. Like before, I have already created a shape for it. And then we're going to create a new object, which we call it boss, and add this shape. Go to the room, which is already up here, select boss, and put the boss on the screen. If you run the game, you'll see that your boss object will show up on the screen even though it doesn't have any movement yet. At first step, in order to make this boss have a more complicated movement, we create a path. Paths are predefined shapes that they can have any form they want that allow an object to move on them. Simply go and start adding the shape that you want. You can click and move the object, move the points, and create any shape that you want. For example, this is our path. We saved it as path 1, and now we go to our boss, create event. So we are basically saying that right as soon as this object is created, we want to do something. And then in the actions, we select paths. This allows us to specify a path for this object. Give it a speed, for example 3. And you also specify what happens at the end. Do you want it to stop, or you want to continue from here, or even do reverse? So we just say continue again. So it stays in a loop and keep moving. Now we see that our boss is moving along the path that we defined for it. Remember that the area in which we defined the path was not the same size as room, which is configurable, and we can do it the way we want. Another way to create more complicated movement is using the concept of timeline. Right-click on timelines and say create timeline. The timeline interface is very similar to creating behaviors for objects, except that instead of events, we have moments. That means there are certain actions that happen at a particular moment. You can start by adding different time moments. For example, at time 0, you want to have a particular movement. Let's say you want the object, whichever object this timeline will be defined for, to move in a certain amount. Let's say move to the right at the speed of 3. And then let's say you want this object to move for 30 seconds, so, or less than that. So at 10 seconds, you want to go down, and it's 2. Add 20. Go to the left. And finally add 30. We'll go up. So this is a simple rectangular shape. Now that we have defined this, we can go to our boss. And right now we had defined a path for it. We're going to remove this and instead assign a timeline. If you do main 2 tab, you'll see that there's a series of time related functions. There are more interesting stuff there, for example setting an alarm and other timing related, but we're going to use set a time. This is the timeline. So you're basically saying that apply the timeline to, which is the one that we created, to this object. It starts immediately, and you can also say loop, so it continue doing the same thing.